Welcome back to Holy Dialogues. I'm here with Pastor Kim and Pastor Marian, my friends. And I've also invited another one of my very good friends, a confidant, someone I trust, my friend Andrew, to talk with us today. Um, so, right out of the gate, Andrew, I invited you on because you come to our small group that meets through our church, and you've been just such a blessing with your transparency. So, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to share with us kind of your spiritual journey, how you came to know God, and how does it feel to be asked that in this forum, or whatever you want to talk about. But that's why I invited you to come on here, because I just appreciate what you have to say, and I want to hear from you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Well, it's really a pleasure to be asked to speak. God has transformed my life in a very short time, in a matter of a few years. And I'm someone who my conversion experience came from a place of disbelief. I did not believe in God. In fact, I had a lot of prejudice against religion. I had a lot of even subtle prejudice against people of faith. Growing up, I was raised where we had a Christmas tree and we did presents, but I had really no idea. I mean, I heard the story of Jesus, but I didn't understand what any of it meant. I never went to church. I never had any religious backgrounds. And in fact, I was raised in a household, single working mom. My mom was actually quite biased against the church because of some of her own experiences growing up, and they're self-reporting it. And so I just, I growing up, I felt like an awkward kid. I felt like everyone kind of had the handbook to humanity except me. I didn't understand, like, when people would go out and play sports, I just felt awkward. I couldn't run as fast as other people. I never knew what to say. I didn't feel as witty as other people. I never felt like I fit in. And then, as I got older, I realized that I was gay. When I was like, I started to realize when I was like 14 or 15 years old. Um, and then I really felt on the outside, like where I had already felt awkward. I felt like, well, you know, I grew up with friends where we played Smear the Queer. Like, we would, jump and tackle each other, and it was in good fun. But the name Smear the Queer still is burned into my mind, and I grew up at a time when my friends in high school, when guys would go to the movie theater together, they'd sit with one seat in between so that people didn't think that they were gay. Like, and I guess I was indoctrinated into a male culture where I didn't see males showing affection to one another in any way. And so the fact that the affection I felt towards other males was stronger and romantic and so forbidden, caused me to feel a lot of internalized shame. I didn't know. I had no one that I could think of at that age to speak to about it, because I was the only one I knew was gay. And then, the world opened up to me when I was 16. I started going to nightclubs in DC. I started going to some big rave like nightclubs, and I met the gay scene. Like, what my wish was granted, and suddenly the floodgates to the gay community were open, and in all of their glory and debauchery. And I started drinking and getting fake IDs and going to bars when I was 16. And then by the time I was 17, I was in with an older gay crowd, and they were using drugs and cocaine. I started using cocaine, so that became part of my story. And it was like it was like all of the debauchery that that's talked about, like sexual immorality, all of that stuff, like just thrown into my life, starting at 16, 17 years old. And I entered a world where sex was almost a currency, and it was completely upside down. And I had no basis. I had no religious training, or I had no values that were rooted in what I have come to understand of scripture at that time. And I was just kind of winging it in life. And I thought that my self-worth derived from how good I looked or who I knew or how witty I was or what organizations I was affiliated with, later what college I would go to school at, all these things, these superficial things that I thought that this world told me that they defined me. And so when the thing is that when I drank alcohol, the feeling that I had of awkwardness, like of who am I supposed to be in this situation? Who do these people want me to be? Who do these people want me to be? Am I supposed to be witty? Am I supposed to be smart? And which Andrew am I supposed to be? Like was the thought in my mind. And I was always playing this game, and it was so stressful that it caused me to never be at ease in social situations, and I never really knew who I was, because I was trying to make myself who I thought you wanted me to be, because I wanted validation, because I was so insecure. And so I when I drank alcohol, I just didn't worry about any of that, and I felt free. And that was kind of my introduction to eating the forbidden fruit or whatever you have it, but that's where I really started my deal with the devil, and I started using drugs to experience personal freedom in a way that I had never experienced it before. And soon they caught up to me, and I became very addicted to alcohol. I used it. I started to need it just to socialize with people, and then I started to need it just to keep my hands from shaking. And by the time I barely graduated from college, graduated late, but I had already had like a week-long blackout one time when I didn't remember anything that had happened that entire week. But I had taken notes in class, and I went back and I saw that I'd taken these notes, but I didn't remember anything in class. And the tears just started to well up. But I had this pride, because I still, I care what you think about me, so I couldn't let the tears show. But after class got out, I ran behind a dumpster, and I just let the tears fall. And then I called my father, and he wasn't answering his phone, but I called someone he works with, and they gave the phone to him, and he didn't know it was me. So he took the call, and I said, why haven't you been taking my calls, Dad? He said, I can't stand to talk to you because you're always drunk when I talk to you. And the tears just flooded down. And I realized I had this problem with alcohol, but I didn't know how to solve it. Anyway, so fast forward in my life, my addiction to alcohol and later to drugs lasted for like 12 years. And they brought me through a lot of psychiatric facilities. They brought me through jails. I had DWIs. I had drunken publics. I had all sorts of disgrace. Just like, just humiliation, abject. Just I had it tore down any sense of the things that I had clung onto, that I had defined myself with, these externals, what I looked like, that was gone. I was gaining all this weight. I was alcoholic drunk. My skin was awful. I'd been making public humiliations of myself constantly. It took away, like I couldn't work. I didn't have a job, and I was in and out of psych hospitals. So it took away the prestige factor and the financial independence factor. God took all that away from me for some time through my addiction. And I thought, I didn't know God at that time, so I didn't know what was happening. But I didn't realize that addiction was really, that was kind of that was God's way of, I guess, there was a silver lining to it all that I didn't know at that time. And so starting in 2016 December, and then 2017, I had spiritual experiences. I'll add among the experiences I had when I was using were suicide attempts. I didn't know what the purpose of this life was, but I remembered hearing that Peggy Lee song, "Is That All There Is?" If that's all there is, my friends, let's just keep dancing. Let's break out the booze and have a ball, if that's all there is. But she sings this song, and she goes through with this experience of life and this experience of life. And then she says, well, is that all there is? Was that it? And I felt that way. It resonated with me so deeply. And I thought, is that all there is to life? Like, what are we doing here? I didn't know, I didn't have a faith. I didn't know what we were doing here. But surely it's not to get up and study and go to school and come back and make good grades and impress people, and then or go get a job and then do it again and again and over, and rounds and rounds we go. And what is the purpose of life? And so that song really resonated with me. And then I got my answer, in 2016, 2017, after having had multiple suicide attempts, the worst of which, where I jumped off a metro platform and I fell 40 feet I fractured my skull and my spine. I ended up with brain damage, and I still have double vision to this day as a result of that injury, the brain trauma. But I decided that I couldn't suffer, and I didn't see the point. I didn't see the point of going on, because life was torturous. Everything that I did to try to stop drinking only resulted in me suffering and white knuckling it. I couldn't. I needed alcohol like fish needed water, and I didn't know how to stop. And there were just consequences everywhere around me for doing something that I didn't know how to do differently. I didn't know how to stop. Anyway, in 2017, I had my first encounters with God, and they started gradually. I started noticing coincidences happening all around me, songs that had significance from my childhood that I hadn't heard in some time, like the Pachelbel canon, just, things that were just kind of started playing again and again. Like, you don't hear something for a long time, and then you hear it in an Uber, and you hear it in a taxi, and you hear it when you get into your car on the radio, and you're just like, what is happening here? Why is this happening? All the stars are lining up. And then I felt a presence. I would have conversations with strangers, and they would be of topics of deep significance, like a man telling me about his wife's like heart condition and her struggle. And at the same time, I'm feeling something, and I'm being touched in a place that I hadn't been touched before, in my life. I'm feeling a connection that I hadn't felt, but it felt really good, and I can't explain it. I've come to understand that feeling now to be the Holy Spirit. I didn't know what that felt like before. I had never experienced that. So I started feeling that come on at different periods of time. Normally when I was having a deep conversation, and then in 2017, I had an experience where I went from just normal emotion to just being horrified. I was suddenly overwhelmed with a feeling of terror, of just absolute terror for what I had done. I had murdered Andrew. I had killed Andrew in just a moment, from me just being normal to just feeling like I was overcome with grief, just absolute insane grief, for what I had done. And in that moment, it felt like it was unfixable. Like, I could not fix this. It was something that was done, and there was no going back. And what had I done? But after about 30 seconds or 45 seconds, that feeling went away, and I was just left being like gripping myself, like, what the hell just happened? Like, what was that? And that presence, God was there with me in that presence, in those moments too. And I've come to understand it as God telling me, it's not okay to kill yourself. Like, it's not okay to give up on yourself. And that ties into my understanding of my journey now, which part of my responsibility is self-love. Like, it's important for me to learn to love myself, and I didn't love myself, and I didn't see the point back then. But that was one of the early experiences that made me realize this was definitely God I was dealing with, because I couldn't understand it any other way. But I didn't know Jesus. I didn't know anything about religion, but I did get my hands on a Bible, and I started reading the Psalms and the Proverbs. And there was about a week that went by when I was reading the Psalms out of the book, and I just had I'm not a very emotional person. I've been through a lot. I've been arrested. I was in jail for over a year. I've been through some stuff that's toughened my skin. But when I read these Psalms, tears just started pouring down my face. Like, I felt that feeling, that presence inside of me. But I felt like I knew in that moment that he was here. I was not alone. My father, my true father, like, I was not alone in this life that had felt horrible. I had been so totally lost and despairing and absolutely beside myself. And I had been that suddenly I wasn't alone. And I felt a mix of emotions. I felt like, thank God you're here. Like, thank God. And his tears are just pouring down my face and getting onto the book. And then I also felt like, where the hell have you been? Like, do you know what I've just been through? Like, so it was this mix. But it was this sort of feeling of familiarity, of something. It was like the where the hell have you been part was like, I knew I knew somewhere deep inside of me, I knew God already. And I didn't know him in this life. I didn't know him at all. And somehow my spirit knew him. And so I guess anyway, that was reading those Psalms for a period of about a week. I kept having those tears, and I just started talking. That's when I started talking to God. And I would just not like pray. I'd never prayed before. I didn't, I didn't know what it was, but I would just be like, okay, so you're here, I guess. So let's talk about this. But I'm angry about, like, I just talked like colloquially, just casually, just as you would talk to a friend. I just started talking to God. And when I would talk to God, oftentimes I feel that feeling of the spirit. It's a feeling of well-being that would overcome me and bring me comfort. And God drew me near to him through those experiences, and also through a series of circumstances that led to me going into rehab. And I had been to all these, fancy rehabs over the course. I'd been to a lot of them, and finally I ended up going to this free rehab and through the county, which ended up being what got me sober. Finally, I guess God had stripped me down to my to just me. Like I didn't have any pretense to cling on to. I didn't have any of those externals to give me a sense of identity, because they had been stripped away at that point. And God's like, okay, now come with me. And so I went to the rehab, and then I went to a place in Alexandria called the Men's Home, Sober Living House for guys. And they would have speakers in every week, and the speakers would share their story about experience, strength, and hope in the program, a 12-step program of recovery, and talk about how their relationship to recovery and to God, and to how it all happened for them in their lives. And I heard a lot of my story and their stories, and I started to get connected to people for the first time. I had been so afraid of people. I'd lived alone for like 12 years, like in various states of abject addiction, and suddenly I was gradually coming out of my shell. So I went I got sober in it was November of 2017, and since then I didn't know what it was like. I knew of God's existence then. The Psalms, reading the Psalms, and having these experiences made me aware that there is a God. Like, clearly there was a God. All these coincidences are happening. I was having these spiritual experiences. There's a God. I get that. But I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't know what that meant. So along with my recovery program, I started praying every morning and every night. And I memorized a few prayers, one of them, the St. Francis prayer, that I would say often. I'd also, every day, every morning and night, I'd turn my will over to God. I'd say, God, I give myself to you to do with me as you will, free me from the bondage of self, and help me to discern what your will is for me today. And it was a gradual process of God leading me, but I started seeing signs and building, I guess, this relationship with God. And today it's amazing. I didn't, in early recovery, I was just focused on learning what I needed to do to get sober and to live this recovery life. But since then, my life has really transformed, where my focus is no longer so much recovery. And I might add too that God lifted any. I was at the end of my addiction. I had a needle in my arm every day. I was shooting up every single day. It had gone from alcohol use primarily to drug use, and I couldn't go without drugs. And God relieved completely the cravings for me to drink or use drugs. So I have not had a craving since I came into recovery to use alcohol or to use drugs. I did go through pretty severe withdrawals when I went into rehab. But oddly, as it would be, I could have left the rehab at any time and gone out to use. But as bad as the withdrawals were, I didn't have the desire to use. And I know that was God. I know somehow God just did that, because otherwise I would have gone out and used. I would have said, I'll fix this by using. I will fix the withdrawal, but I didn't. And God held me. And he's taken my hand every step of the way. So going through the recovery process, I kind of did an inventory of my past, and then I confessed, all of it to my sponsor in the program, and I started working on my personal character defects, becoming aware of the nature of my own, sinfulness, and then I made a list of the wrongs I had done, and I tried to make my own amends, but I realized what I'm doing right now, what God has me on right now, is kind of He's taking me through those amends Himself, and I have in the process given up any notion of defining my life or planning my life's trajectory for myself. I am in a very, very unusual place in our society anyway, where I'm just letting God lead me from day to day. I am not working, and I'm relying on God to provide for my needs and to show me my next step each day, just trusting, and the pieces fall into place, and miraculously, the next day reveals to me how it will happen. And I've continued to do this faith walk, and to see how God is continuing to provide for me as I'm continuing to walk through my journey. And as far as how I feel, I mean, coming in, I was terrified. And now I feel more at peace than I knew was possible in this life. I don't have the things that I thought I needed when I came into recovery to be happy, because I don't have a job, and I don't have a house of my own, and I don't have a car, and I don't have all the financial freedom that I thought I would need to be happy. But not having that financial freedom is how God leads me down His path right now. He shows me the next step when I need to see it. And what I didn't know that I could have at the start of my journey is these spiritual gifts, the feeling of inner peace and contentment, a feeling of confidence, a feeling of serenity, a feeling of joy, an ability to love. So much of the fear that I was paralyzed with when I came into to recovery, and when I started this journey with God, that fear has largely slipped away. And it just keeps getting better, and my life continues to have more meaning. And I have come to understand that my life is only beginning. Where I had thought, like, oh God, look what I've made a mess of my life. God's like, no, that was my birthing pains. Like, I am just a baby. I realized, and I am just a baby on my spiritual journey, and all that I went to a place that I needed to be, so that I could start my spiritual journey on good footing. And in my case, He used my addiction to do that, in part. And yeah, so I feel like I'm starting in some ways with my relationship with God, delving into Scripture, but I have this appetite for it, because I just that feeling of Peggy Lee, is that all there is? That's gone. Like, now there's God, like now, oh my God, there's so much more, and love, like real love, like love that I feel from God. And He speaks to me at times and makes me laugh and comforts me in ways that I never knew were possible. And that love is so inspiring to me. And the feeling of His Spirit and the way that He carries me is something that I never knew was possible, and beats a car, a job, and my own plans for my own life any day. Today I choose to follow God, and wherever He leads me, and I keep growing on the journey. So that's kind of what I was thinking of.
What a beautiful story that only God could craft. It's beautiful.
Andrew, in the 12-step tradition, I want to say just thanks for sharing.
Yes.
My pleasure. Thanks for your interest. It's I've seen on God speaks to me in different ways, but I've seen on license plates of cars a few times. I've seen testimony, and I think I feel like one of the ways that I can share this gift that has been given to me is to share it with other people. I feel like any time that I can my story can help other people to find their relationship with God, and and find love and find freedom ultimately. It's such a gift. That's part of my journey and why I'm here. So I'm really grateful that you asked me.
So Psalms, what took you to Psalms? Do you remember?
The Psalms. I don't know, but along this other things that would happen, like I would open up to a page of the Bible. There was a long period of time where I would open up to a page and it would talk right about something that I was just thinking about. And I'd be like, how did you do that? How did you know my hand would touch and how does that work? And I don't understand how God works, but I just know that anything is possible with God. My understanding of the world has been greatly humbled. I realize I don't know very much. I really don't. And that's great, because the world that I'm seeing in what God is showing me is so much greater than I had ever conceived this world to be.
You mentioned your mother not having grown up in the church either. How has your family received kind of everything that you've gone through, just the entire ordeal?
They've been supportive. I am not particularly close with my family, but they're very happy to have me sober and doing well.
Talk about with me, Andrew, your friendships. You had all kinds of friendships before, you were talking about in clubs and things like that. Have many of those friends tracked your progress, what you're doing, where God has taken you?
In clubs? You mean in clubs when I was using, like nightclubs?
Yeah. Okay. In your life when you were using, any of those friends still keep contact with you, or did you need to just make a break there because of your addiction?
So some of them are actually in recovery. And I don't know that the way that I define friendship today is a little different than I defined it then. Then it was just people that I hung out with and had fun with. Mm-hmm. Today I find that that I wouldn't characterize them by the standard. We didn't know each other and relate to each other on a different level. We just partied and got high and drank together. I am friends with some of them to this day, the ones who have entered recovery, but most of them I'm still not in a lot of contact with.
And about your sexuality, talk to me more about that, how that has moved along in this progress as well. When I say progress, I think recovery. In your recovery, how has your interaction with your sexuality been affected in any way? Or your relationship with God?
I had a lot of fear. I actually had a fear of straight men, a lot of fear of straight men that I never got over because I was using drugs and drinking. So all I did was delay any development that I would have had during the time that I was using. So I didn't really learn to overcome any fears when I was drinking. I just hid them with the alcohol or with the drugs. And the fears that I had when I was when I entered recovery of people, and I had to start facing those and overcoming them. And I don't think I could have done that without God's help. I had paralyzing social anxiety when I was using, that kept me like locked in my apartment. I wouldn't leave. And I think I just got off the topic of your question. What was it again that you had asked? You said.
Well, I'm already at a second question, which is fine. I think it'll lead into it. I find it really interesting. I'm probably the only straight one in this little group, but talk to me about this fear of straight men, or is it just straight people in general? Because I haven't heard that term used before. Talk
Well, okay,
more
so
about
from
that fear that's there.
well,
Anything
and
about
I'd say now it's not there anymore. I'm not afraid of straight men anymore. But like I said, when I grew up, we played Smear the Queer, and faggot was
yeah.
a word that was constantly used. It would fag this, fag that, like what you're a fag, and people would call it homo, like like I said, guys would sit, a seat apart in the movie theater with the gap in between because they didn't want to appear gay. Like so, I grew up in this culture of homophobia, and I just assumed that that if any straight men knew that I was gay, that they would I was afraid that they would, that they would hate me for it, and I had experiences in college that showed me that my straight guy friends were tolerant to being to me being gay, but because I was drinking and using, those experiences did not help me to overcome my fear. I didn't begin to overcome my fear until I faced these issues, these fears soberly with God, with God by my side. And once I started soberly to face the world, um, I have I've been able to overcome those fears. But yeah, I I was very afraid of judgment. I didn't have a sense before coming into recovery, or knowing God. I didn't have a sense of identity for myself, and so who I was what you thought of me in my own eyes. I believed that if you didn't like me, then I probably wasn't good, and I had a very fragile sense of identity, and having the notion of having people not approve of something that I was fundamentally as a gay man, was a fear that was very overwhelming to me. Today, my sexuality is not really that big a part of, it's not really that important to me. I see myself as a friend, a brother in Christ. I see. I don't really. I don't. My sexuality is not on the forefront of my sense of identity anymore, where it once was. So I can say that it's not. The fears are not really there anymore.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and helping me understand.
Andrew, if I'm mischaracterizing, then just correct me. But as I'm listening to you talk, here you are out here living life, and things are tough, and it seems as though the way you were talking about, God is just reaching down directly to you through these coincidences, through you've picked up the Bible, started reading Psalms. So as you've grown in your spirituality and your journey, you also mentioned you kind of had a bad relationship with organized religion in the beginning. If it has changed, what's your relationship now with like organized church or organized religion? Because you've had this spiritual, like almost direct connection to God. What's that like now, if at all?
So I'm looking to grow my relationship with God in any way that I can, and I have friends of different faiths. Uh, I have a friend who just told me that he joined the Mormon Church, a friend of mine in recovery, Church of Latter-day Saints, and he was telling me about his journey. I think it's fascinating, all of it. I do attend a church, Grace Community Church. I've been watching it online for the pandemic months. But I had just started going to that when the pandemic hit, and God has really spoken to me through those sermons. They've been really on topic for my life. Those are some of the coincidences that continue in my life, and one of the ways that God continues to speak to me. So I'm just beginning to form relationships with the faith community, and another reason I'm grateful that you guys asked me to be here today, because I really haven't talked a lot. I came from a world that was purely secular and biased, and so I'm grateful to be in a place where I can can hear and learn and know more about the faith community.
I'm wondering about Converge. And you mentioned before we started that you'd met someone who invited you to a Converge group. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what that's like for you to go to Converge groups and what a Converge group actually is.
So it's fantastic. I had my experience with God. God's I have this insatiable appetite to know God in any way that I can because of the way that He entered my life. And so hearing about Converge and starting to go to groups was amazing, because I got to talk to people for the first time in my life who shared a faith that I was just beginning to develop. I didn't understand anything about it, and I feel like I've made a lot of progress. I've read, I think, most of the New Testament now, and reread parts of it, and I've attended the 2 Bible studies, Converge, and my other, and it's been really, really great to meet. Part of the Christian fellowship is about relations. I mean, most of it's about love and relations, and meeting other people that share faith is essential. Like, if I can't share my faith with others, then it's somewhat dead. So I'm really, really grateful to have that group, as a springboard to get to know the faith community.
Well, tell me more about Converge. It sounds like it's a great thing, but like, how does a person get into Converge and all that stuff? And what is it? Who is it for, and all that?
I think that's probably a question better directed to Jeremy.
Fair enough. I will say this about Converge. Andrew is actually leading it tonight. So it's really just a collection of people. I think, Andrew, you did say it best. It's a collection of people who, many of whom have been kind of disenfranchised from the faith community because it's designed for LGBTQ folks, same-sex attracted folks, or people who, regardless of what your theological view on sexuality is, it's a place where people on that spectrum can come and share their faith and share what it's like to journey with God. And so this semester, we've been having different members who attend the group lead. And so tonight, Andrew's leading. So I appreciate that you've come on here today, and then here, in about 4 hours, the show will be completely yours for an hour and a half. It will be all you. So yeah, we have fun. It's both serious and fun. It's not, there's no agenda except the agenda of connecting folks back with God. I think that's what I'd say it is.
Is it in person or is it online?
Yeah, we've done both, actually. Allegedly, it might rain here in DC, so we might have to go online, but I've told everyone we're meeting in the park. We actually meet in a very famous park in DC, Malcolm X Park, or Meridian Hill Park, whatever you want to call it. So mostly we've been meeting in person because the park's big enough. We can sit in a big circle if you're uncomfortable. Even during the pandemic, we're meeting in person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Neat.
Andrew, is Psalms still your favorite book of the Bible, or what parts of the Bible really speak to you right now?
I mean, they all do. Like, the New Testament in particular, I love. Like Jeremy said, we're doing Romans right now. So, and I'm finding tons of good stuff anywhere I look. I mean, it's just, it really, really, really speaks to me. I really like James a lot. The Gospel of John, I like a lot. 1 John, I really love. Yeah, I mean, it's written in such a way that it just, I don't know, it pauses you to, you stop and think. You don't, you can read it and it can tell you one thing in one context at one sitting, and then you can read those same lines again, and in a different context it can speak to you differently. And that's the genius about how scripture is written. It just it's appropriate with different messages at different times, in different contexts, but the same words. And I don't know, only God can do that, right? Like yeah, I'm
Where did you get your
haven't
first
read his.
Bible?
Sorry.
Where did you get your first Bible?
My father gave it to me.
Is that the one that you reconnected with?
Yeah.
When
Yeah,
God
it's the
found
same
you?
one.
Yeah,
It's
beautiful.
the same one I've had all along. Yeah, I've
Wow.
kept it, and I've highlighted it and marked it up, but because of I had the experiences with this book, so it's like, okay, this is the one. I'll read it on my phone sometimes, but this is the one that has meaning for me, because it's what I got to understand God through.
Mhm.
Well, we're approaching time. So, Andrew, anything else you want to share? I'm just so grateful you've come on here. I mean, as early as this morning, I'm trying to explain to Andrew what we do here, and I never know how to say it that well, other than we bring people together to chat, to be seen, to share who we are, and hopefully connect with anyone who sees this in ways that, to your point, Andrew, that only a moment by moment can create, right? Each moment's different. The words come out differently. Nothing's ever planned in these scenarios. We don't plan what we're going to talk about. We just be together and something happens. And there's not a way to explain it better than that. So, Andrew, any last thoughts for us before we close it out?
No, I really appreciate, Jeremy. I was saying to you, I texted you earlier that you're such a great leader, and you always build people up and bring people together. And I really, that's one of the things I appreciate in the group. One of the things Converge does for me is it brings me together with people, and helps me to get direction and to have support. And I really I benefit a lot from it. So I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight there at the park.
I'll see you during the park tour. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you.